As always, if something you learn about's not of any use, then of what use is it? I want to point out to you another basic part of the information about the triads and the way it's tied in a sense, to Metavesco. But all of this, if it's not of any information, if it's not of any value, then you have missed the point. Now the thing about triads, it's of immediate use that you need to see. That I tell you that everything is supported by three legs, that there are three aspects to everything that you can be conscious of, or for those of you who are particular, of those things of which you can be conscious. Ordinary consciousness, which includes you and everybody else, can only see two. Now the way to use the knowledge of the triads is to teach yourself and then to make yourself go out and play in the irrelevant. That is how you change things. That is the only way that you, by any viewpoint, can change things. And for some of you who are worrying about your own yellow circuit kinds of dancing around about, well, is there any sort of thing even resembling free will? Can you really change anything, etc.? Then you can put it in quotation marks and say that that's the only way that you can apparently make any change. Anything else is change, you're going to begin to see yourself. It's just that which happens. And for you to say that you caused something to change, that you made something change, you are deluding yourself. You're just staying in the same kind of foggy position that everyone else is in the city. For you to apparently make any change whatsoever, what you have got to do is play in the irrelevant. If you stay locked into the ordinary bifocal conflicts, if you stay locked into the ordinary dichotomy dances, then nothing happens. Now things change, things move, but what you have been left with, and in a sense, some of you, probably your attitude is what brought you to stumble across somebody like me, this activity, is you kept wanting to make some kind of drastic changes and you couldn't find the way to do it. And there may have been, from your viewpoint, rather mundane changes, having to do with you psychologically, having to do with you emotionally. And you just found that you didn't have the energy, you didn't have the right kind of directions. No one operating at line level consciousness can directly make any change. That is not something I can prove to binary consciousness. Can't even start, wouldn't even try. And you can't see it. You can hear me say it, and all ordinary consciousness can do is take it as being somebody's theory. All binary consciousness can do is either accept it as some sort of theory, the basis of which you cannot presently see, or else just absolutely out of hand, reject it. So I know we're not going anywhere by me making the proclamation, but I've simply got to point out to you, I got to tell you to start with, unless you are playing with the knowledge of the triads, unless you are out playing in the irrelevant, then everything that happens to you simply happened to you. And if it is apparently, if you can, through your own internal voices, tell yourself that I do feel much better since I left that sorry son of a bitch, and you believe now that you left him or her, or that you quit your job. I finally had enough of being pushed around by that Simon Legree. And so one day I just finally told him off, which may or may not have been other people's observation as to what happened. If it were not for the ability of ordinary consciousness for the partnership to tell itself, to tell the other partner, that is, that yeah, you done good. You told them. I assume all partnerships use bad English, is why I said you done good. So that none of you people from out of town will bother to write me letters or to send me your old college textbooks on English. But it's the partnership will tell the other partner that, yeah, you done good, in the same way that it tells it that, yeah, you didn't done good, which is the common voice that almost everyone hears in the city. It is part of being life's little spokesman and life's little open ends is, yeah, I'm not doing right. But even when you've apparently done right, even when you can apparently through one of your voices defend yourself, or you can speak up and say, I did do something. I did finally quit my job. I put up with it for 10 years and I finally told him off. And you must seriously be able to consider the possibility that someone else, maybe everybody else involved, saw it another way. That everybody there, including the boss, everybody there, including one of your partners, has another story. You may have said, as he was throwing you out the door, hey, I quit. This is not a psychological ploy. This is not a psychological attack on my part of some psychological ploy. That is simply the way the memory of the partnership works. That's one of the benefits of having a memory from life's viewpoint, as that people can live in such a position that they don't know where they are. Sometimes I've shown it to some of the other people, I drew this, that if we had something covered up by, if you just saw the top part, it would apparently be a binary figure. It's two peaks, and it would have to, if they're supposed to be mountains, or if I said, all right, this is some little symbol that I've made up, and that's all you saw from there, and that's why I'm covering up the basis of it, it would apparently have 2 feet. And it has, I guess it's some kind of optical illusion in a sense, but actually it has 3 feet here, and it doesn't make any sense, because based upon these 2 up here, it shouldn't have 3, but anyway, I was able to do it. Surprised even me here in the city. But this represents, in a very crude and opportunistic fashion, the very fact that whatever it is that you seem to be involved with, whatever seems to be your fear, whatever seems to be your problem, whatever seems to be anything in life that you want to change, from losing weight to changing jobs to upping your profession, to upping your income, to upping your social status, everything involved seems to involve only 2. Until you met me, you didn't even think about that. And just, if I had pointed out, and that's all we had done is had a beer, and I pointed that out, and you left, you think, boy, the man is a genius at stating the obvious. Now that you mention it. Because if there were not 2 things involved, such as my propensity to eat at least 3 dozen donuts at a time, Jesus, I wouldn't have this problem of trying to lose weight. If I didn't seem to be addicted to nicotine, I wouldn't have this problem. I keep saying I'd like to quit smoking. If I did not seem to have some inherited weakness in drinking, I would not be wishing I could cut down on my alcohol consumption, whatever it is. If I wasn't so in love with this bitch, I wouldn't put up with the way she treats me. There seems to be, obviously, once I point it out, there seems to be in anything in life, anything that you want to change, there's got to be 2 things. My desire to change, and somebody, normally out there, somebody is in my way. If it's not that, then there is some weakness, there's some problem to keep me from changing. So there seems to be 2 things involved, 2 elements at all times. Anything else, as we were staying there with our one and only conversation having a beer, and I pointed this out, and I said, well, there's always 3. There are in fact 3 winds that keep everything moving on this planet. There are in fact 4, but you got to even see 3 for us to ever start talking seriously. And you said, all right, what is it? Any problem I got, I can see that I want to change it, and then I can see that which seems to be the inertia, or that which seems to be the elements, the situation to keep me from changing, that I want to leave this woman, or this man, I just say a woman. She drives me crazy. She keeps me from getting to school on time. She keeps me from being able to continue to go to school at night and do my job. She drives me nuts and all that, and I say, why don't you leave her? I don't know. It's like she has my heart in a hammerlock. It's the devil's work. I don't know what it is, but there are definitely 2 problems. Now, you tell me that you got to take into consideration something else to ever change. And in my drunken state there, in a moment of weakness, I say, yeah, that's true. And you say, all right, what is it? And I say, all right, what's the 2 elements of the problem? You say, me and her. Don't send me your book, I know it's hurt me. And you say, all right, what's the 3rd part? And I say, all right, what's left? And if you weren't real drunk, you might say, well, what's left is everything except me and her. I go, And it's insanity. Now let me remind you, for the last 2 times we met, I mentioned to you Metavesco. The curing of problems simply, the apparent curing of problems simply by the investigation, by hitting on the side of the TV set, by making an appointment with a doctor, and the malady seems to go away. Or even you go to the doctor, and he charges you some outrageous price to beat on you and kick in the knee and kick in other places and stick his finger in odd places, and he says, oh, I'll be $175, I don't find anything wrong with you. And you go, well, by God, you're right. That. The thing about knowing that is you have got to use it. And the way you use this is not just as simple. Well, it is as simple, but that wouldn't do for you people. I was going to say it's just as simple as a proper kind of investigation of what seems to be your illness, what seems to be your problem. But then all of you people at an ordinary level of consciousness would say, well, I do investigate. I've worried about my problem, I've worried about my job, I've worried about this unprofitable relationship, ad infinitum. So I have investigated. So you see, that's why I can't really say that. You don't know how to do it. So here's how you have to do it. It is a kind of treatment by the impertinent, which is playing in the irrelevant, brought down to a medical level. It's using irregular methods, because a real revolutionist would have absolutely no faith whatsoever. Now remember, I'm speaking in parables, and it sounds like reality at the same time. A real revolutionist would have absolutely no faith whatsoever in the city's medical establishment. None. You know why? You don't say because he doesn't like doctors. Hell, nobody likes doctors. That's not the point. He doesn't like the medical treatment for one reason, because everybody's already handled it. Some of you, I assume, on a nice warm night like this, understand I'm not simply talking about medicine, and I'm not talking about the medical establishment. Whatever seems to be the treatments available to help one, the real revolutionists would have nothing to do with, because they would already be proven to be too slow. If they could be talked about, the energy is gone, whatever energy it ever had. The investigation, the proper use of Metavesco is you have to learn how to use impertinent methods. You have to be your own physician, but you can't treat yourself with any treatment you ever heard about. If you've ever heard about it, it won't work. You might as well go to a doctor, read priest, rabbi, cult, yourself, even worse. You people worry about being taken in. Taken in by some fraud like me. I always just find that so funny. When you don't realize that you have been taken by the biggest con in the world. Not me. You have been conned to a shameless degree. Before I ever heard of you. You have been conned by one, in quotation marks, you have been conned by one that has absolutely what you would call a sense of shame, a fear of being caught. Ha! The one I have in mind snaps his or her fingers at the possibility of you ever catching on to what's going on. And if you're worried about being conned and taken by another human, assuming the one I have in mind has a real overt sense of humor that we could talk about, I must tell you that this one must go away way out of eyesight, earshot from us, wherever that may be, and have to go. But back to the real business. To treat yourself by Metavesco, if you could hear it as simplistically as I said you couldn't, as I started dragging this into it, would be that whatever seemed to be your irritants, whatever seemed to be your problems, whatever seemed to be your complaints about life, whatever seemed to be the areas that frighten you, this whole thing, anything that seems to cause a ripple over this lake of imaginary smooth consciousness that everyone dreams about as being heaven. Now, whether you could stand it right now or not is another question. But that's the dream, whether you describe it that way or not. The dream is to cut out all the problems. Of course, you think a lot of the problems are things like money. You're trying to smooth out the lake. All right, anything, whatever you plug it in, anything that causes ripples in your life, the very things that you wish are like the lumps under a carpet, and you wish if I could just stamp out 2 or 3 of these, I wouldn't need to go listen to anybody talk. I wouldn't need to read more books on self-help. I wouldn't need to consider analysis if I had the money, or if I could find a psychiatrist who would take food stamps. If I could just stamp out these 2 or 3 lumps, I'd be all right. All right, the lumps. The thing is, if I could speak that simplistically and you could hear that directly, which is not your fault, it's just the limits of binary consciousness, then I could tell you that Metavesco would do it if you knew how. But at least you need to be able to hear this and consider the fact that there is nothing that you have ever looked into adequately, because you've never looked into it correctly. And I know that all of you would say, well, oh, that's absolute insanity, because the things that bother me. And I have thought about them, I've diagrammed them like sentences, I've thrown out the I Ching sticks, and I've talked to astrologers, and I've even sat down by myself once or twice and tried to think about it. And so don't tell me that. And I am telling you that. How else do you explain the fact? Well, I can't prove it, but you ought to be able to smell some connection with the fact that I told you of the guy that said the majority of the TV sets that people brought in, whatever it was, as soon as they got the door, he hit it good, and they worked, and that was it, and he charged them. He told them to come back Thursday. The people who call up a physician, or even actually go to a doctor, and he looks you over, nothing wrong. Took your car in, it won't make that noise. How's it go? Ba-chunk, chunk, chunk. I don't know, it just stopped on the way up here, just I pulled in. The mechanic said, well, I don't know, I'll be $50. In a sense, all that's impertinent. It's illogical. It's irregular. It does not fit. And yet it happens constantly. It's not something metaphysical. It's not some other Twilight Zone. This happens all the time. If you knew, that's the first part I'm trying to tell you, you at least should remember that. There is a way in which to investigate a problem that will cure it. Of course, I'm using cure in a rough sense. From a more four-dimensional view, if you want me to be more specific, it will treat it. But it can apparently cure it, which right now to you people, you'd be delighted with that. But it has to be investigated in a certain way. And it obviously, assuming I'm telling you something true and correct, it obviously must be investigated in a way that you've never done it. Or else you'd know how to do it, right? Even I can be that logical, just in a weak moment. So if it is correct, what I'm telling you, you obviously do not know how to do it. And that's why I'm bringing in, if you can see the connection with the triads themselves, is you have got to revert to, once you know about it, going for treatment into the irrelevant. Now, a lot of the excursions, I'll just point out if some of you want to try to piece this together, have had a piece of this in them for the last several months with you new people. And part of the attempt to get you to play in the relevant is me not telling you exactly what the purpose was. Whereas your own consciousness, with all the little excursions I gave to go out and do certain things at a store, with a sales clerk, to strangers, to do a sham poll, all of you are sophisticated enough, intelligent enough, been around the block enough that your consciousness went, oh, as soon as I said it, you'd figured out, well, the purpose is blah, blah. And if it didn't seem all that clear, once you got out and started doing it, and you talked to the first person, or somewhere along the way you went, oh, this is to make us see blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't. Whatever you thought it was, no matter what it was, if you could think of, oh, that was the purpose, then that wasn't it. Part of the purpose was irrelevant. If any known treatment would help you in what you consider to be your problems, then why would you not be helped? Because you know the treatments. I got a second. Think about it. Yeah, that's a trick again. Well, if it is, it sure is a simple, childish trick to ask you just point blank that if the treatments that you know about would work, then why didn't they work? They will never work. If the treatment is known in the city, it's already been handled, if it's already been talked about, if somebody has thought about it and then spoke about it and one other person heard it, it's too late. It is now part of the great dichotomy. It's a part of the great binary dance. And it is now locked into a two-step. It is a kind of gridlock. It is a kind of running about a central point that you call the problem, and it seems to be you and then the resistance to the problem, or you and the cause of the problem. What seems to be the treatments available lie within the realm of the triad. At least if any of you think that this sounds too weird and spooky, or that I just pulled this out of the thin air somewhere years ago, can you take the picturizations I've also... It's more than a picturization, but I'm trying to be reasonable sounding about it. That all consciousness can do right now at the ordinary level is pick out one half of an ongoing, an observable, four-dimensional reality. So whatever information you got, you've only got half of it. Once you've got some kind of continuing awareness of that could be true, that begins to strike you somewhere down at the genetic level, that is, sad to say, as illogical as it is, as unreasonable or as new, as surprising as this seems to be to me, something tells me that is correct. If it's something that doesn't tell me absolutely that I can see that's correct, something tells me that, by God, it seems like it ought to be correct so strong that it sure is fishy. If you get to that point, then all the information available, everything that is readily available, that everyone else believes to be proper treatments, proper ideas, proper philosophies, do you see from the starting gate that they're all morphically flawed? The information will never give you enough data that you can make any change based upon the situation, based upon the way consciousness now sees it. As many times as even you new people have heard the use of the term neuralize, and I know that many of you still believe that you don't understand what it meant. I can give you yet another definition. To neuralize something would be to be able to study it without picking it up. Ordinary consciousness cannot study anything without picking it up, and as soon as it picks it up in two hands. And as soon as it picks it up, it has turned whatever it was. If it had any potential, if it had any sort of extraordinary potential information inherent, as soon as you pick it up with consciousness, you are locked in to a binary situation. And I can continue to talk about binary situation. You are locked in to a position of absolutely flawed information that is at least 50% lacking. And you'll never know it. Never know it. You're not supposed to know it. It's not an evil plot, it's the way things are arranged. I say it's not an evil plot also, take that in quotation marks. I just don't want to frighten anybody. It's not an evil plot directed at you personally. How about that? Whew. I know that makes me feel a lot better, doesn't it? Since I'm only using one side of the tape tonight, let me speed it up and just tell you directly as far as using something. Does that ruin everything? I can't even lean and slump after St. Q's. If you had what appeared to be a problem, a situation, there is one thing that you can always do. And I don't care what you believe you have done with a situation. I don't care how intractable the whole problem seems to be. You can always do this, and you would be doing it in a revolutionary manner. You'd be doing it in a proper manner, and that is do something irregular. Do something impertinent. But you've got to mean, you can't just be now, of course, walk around the block nutsy. When you start to do the impertinent, it has to be directed toward the situation. Let us say it is this dance that you and your sexual partner have been going through for months or years, and you can't seem to break it up, and you can't seem to walk out. Anything you've ever done, anything you've ever thought about doing, forget it. Just forget it. Do something absolutely irrelevant as far as you can tell. Such as, now let us say that you came to me. Let me put it on a real personal level. And you said, I like a lot of what I heard, blah, blah, blah. Can you help me with one thing? I'm living with this person, been with them for months or years, and they're driving me nuts, and I can't seem to leave, and I can't be satisfied to be here. Can you tell me what to do? And I said, all right, will you be satisfied with one or the other? If I can tell you what to do, and it will just come upon you, no more discussion, that you'll either be able to live with the person to further notice and everything seemed to be fine, or else the whole relationship will just fall apart and you can walk away and just forget it, like a bad dream. Well, you accept one of those, because that's the only thing I can do. That's the only thing possible. And if you said, yeah, then I could say, all right, anything you've ever done, don't ever try. Anything you've ever thought about doing, don't do. But go do something absolutely. But keep in mind, what you're trying to do is cure this, quote, problem that you have. It's to do something that is absolutely impertinent to it. Such as, you go announce, I'm just going to still use it from a male viewpoint, that you go announce to the woman, I'm going back to school at night 3 nights a week and study accounting. But now you've got to hate accounting. It's got to be irrelevant, it's got to be irregular, it's got to be impertinent. And of course the whole thing, it's not just accounting, it's going to school. So the whole thing has got to be something that's just not part of your problem. It's not part of your discussion. It's not been something going on that's already been worn out. You understand? It can't be something like she's been saying for years, boy, when are you going to get over that crummy job working at the service station, make something out of yourself? The people down the street, so-and-so, he goes to school at night. You know, you can't, it's got to be something that you've never been through. It might be something as small as this. Go out and get your head shaved and come in the door. If you do something impertinent to the situation, if you can hold on just for a second, sometimes even a minute, the situation will change. You have taken a situation which is always supported by a triad and ordinary consciousness cannot see it, and you have fiddled with the unseen leg that at the ordinary level neither you nor the other people involved, people or peoples involved, can see. But just like, what do they call it? Fucking magic. The situation will be as though, you'll understand it then. Let's say it's you and this other person, this personal relationship problem. You'll understand as though then that both of you were standing on a platform with legs on it, 3 as a matter of fact, that you didn't know about, and somebody got down there and began to shake it. And you'll, for the first time in your life, have some sense, believe it or not, of power. That you did this and it was insane. Another person just goes, I'm just going to use street terminology, and it doesn't mean anything, but it's like the other person gets their mind blown out. They do not know what happened. You have not done anybody any damage. But for the first time in your life, you will have almost done something. But the only way that you can get to it is to go play in the irrelevant. If you stay where everything is pertinent, if you stay where everything is important, that is, by common agreement, by your agreement, that just everybody knows. Well, such as everybody knows it won't do any good to do something irrelevant. Everybody knows that. If you stay where everything is known, if you stay where everything is predictable, where everything is considered to be important, where only these kinds of actions even have the potential to be valuable. If you stay there, then you're going to stay there. There is much more that I could even talk about the triads. But of practical value is the fact that you will change any situation if you will start out trying to dicker with, trying to fiddle with, trying to play in what seems to be the irrelevant to that situation. That is the way to shake it. That is the way to change it. Some people, this is not really a warning. I'm not trying to frighten anybody. If any of you get frightened by this, the first time or two, some people express a great deal of surprise that I understand, like, well, this is not what I expected to happen. But I have never had someone want their money back. I've never had anybody say, I wish I hadn't done that. But they will say, and sometimes they don't say it in words, but I see it written on their little bills, that this is not what I expected. But no complaints. It's never what you expected. What ordinary consciousness expected is no change. That's what life in the city is. It's, yeah, I'm a sorehead, and I expect to go to my grave being a sorehead. In fact, if I live long enough, I'll probably be even a bigger sorehead. I'll put on weight, and I'll even care less about my personal appearance, and I won't mind speaking right up. I'll probably bitch more publicly than I do now if I live to be 70 or 80, because who cares if some old fart waves his fist and curse. That's what's expected. And it would certainly be a part of the predictable to also say expected for me to say, all right, go do the irrelevant to the situation. All right, the expected there is, well, it won't accomplish anything. Anytime, when I said, if you didn't hear what I was saying, that it wasn't really a warning, but I will tell you, anytime that you bring in the E force to a C and D, that you bring in the third element, you bring in the third leg that is supporting any situation, the situation is going to change. And the situation will change in a way that the first two elements, you and another person, or if you want to look at it as you and your own partnership, it will change in a way that you're going to feel like the first time or two, I didn't expect that. Such as, if I'm not making it clear enough, that you come in with your head shaved and you announce, I won't be home, you don't have to worry about cooking me dinner because on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, because I have enrolled in night classes, I'm going to become a CPA. And as soon as I graduate, I'm going to let my hair grow back out, we'll buy a BMW, and we'll become vegetarians. The next morning you get up, and you have, for the first time in years, a nice breakfast made, a little rose on the table, and you see her walking through the room, and she is very quietly and smiling and humming, packing her clothes. And it's the first time, as long as you can remember, that she hasn't been bitching and raising hell, and suddenly it strikes you, at first, maybe, well, this is some kind of sarcastic, she's trying to, she doesn't believe I'm going back to school, or she thinks I was drunk or stoned or something. And you try to say something, and then after a few seconds it strikes you that this, as far as ordinary consciousness, ordinary life, that this is no act. That this is the nicest she's been to you since 1972 when you first met. And she's just as nice as she can be, but it's just a nice polite that I didn't mean to awaken you. I was trying to keep breakfast warm. I was going ahead, I got my ticket, and I'm going back home, going back to Omaha and stay with my family for a while. And that's it. No, don't drive me that. No, I've already called a cab. And she gives you a little kiss on the cheek goodbye and shakes your hand and says, if you're ever near Omaha and you're not doing anything, give me a ring. That was one of the choices now that you said. I can't leave her. I can't get out of this situation. It's like I'm fighting with a tar baby. And we can't split up and we can't stay together. We're driving each other nuts. There it is. I cured it overnight. But it's going to strike you Well, that's not what I expected. But, as I said, I can also guarantee you'll have no complaints, but you will be surprised, and that is not the point. The point is then you should have some more understanding or some more fuel to investigate that there is always something going on, is something as simplistic, as crude as seems to be the battle between the sexes. That there was something going on all this time that I never saw, which was E, the third force, the irrelevant. That's all ordinary consciousness sees. Those of you who hadn't heard it, I referred to it by all kinds of names, but one thing is forces, which is it's all ad hoc. There is no such thing as C force or D force or E force, because C force from one view is D force from somebody else's view. C force was the Germans, that was their attitude, attacking Stalingrad. But to them, did they see that as C force? No, give me a break. Certainly not. There's no such thing by itself as a C force out there floating around. That's religious stories in the city. That's the old idea of good and evil, that there are things that are good per se and evil per se. The belief that there are just some way forces running loose in the world that you've got to get in touch with, and there is no such thing. But at any rate, C and D, I could just call them 1, 2, and 3. I'm up close, I'm running out of, I change it every couple of years. I guess I'll start calling it east, north, and south. I would call them colors, but I've already used up almost all the colors in my other chart and maps. The thing is, the names of them should be that which you almost can't relate to for a while. And when you start relating to it, it's when I have to change them out. Because now everybody has C down. Their shortcut for a while was, all right, that seems to be the creative force, and D seems to be the destructive force. That which seems to be trying to resist change and protect the status quo. And the E, of course, I contribute to this. The E stands for the irrelevant. Don't send me a book. I know how to spell irrelevant. Well, I used to. The thing is, right now, for you newer people, is don't get hung up with that. It's simply the fact that there are 3 elements. There are 3 forces. There are 3 legs. There are 3 inputs supporting anything that your consciousness can conceive of, whether it be called a problem or anything else. If you can conceive of it, there are 3 forces holding it together. But ordinary consciousness only sees 2. And if I insist, there's got to be more than that. Whatever the problem is, you see the world conflict. Let's say that you're politically involved, oriented, and you saw it. The great struggle throughout the life of man right up until today is a struggle between the desire for freedom on one part and the desire of other people to be tyrants. And that's it. And you say, that's it. It's a class struggle. And I say, all right, you got 2 things. Now, would you admit that there seem to be some people, or at least some aspects of life, but some people that do not seem to be directly involved with this? And you would have to say, all right, there do seem to be people that are almost bystanders. I mean, I got no use for them. I respect the enemy more. I respect D force rather than these people. And they can't see it. And that's all right, there's the other element. And they think, well, that's irrelevant. And yes, it appears to be irrelevant. But you couldn't have what seems to be the first 2. You couldn't seem to have the problem. You couldn't have you and this woman, you and this man, and this tar baby unsatisfactory relationship were it not for E. Where would you be? How would you operate were it not for the 3rd force, for the 3rd leg, for all of that which seems to be irrelevant, for all of that which is not you and her? How could you and her have any relationship were it not for cornflakes, for BMWs, for the Trump Tower, for Omar Gaddafi, for Sister Teresa, Mother Teresa, for Omaha, for the Greyhound bus station, for the Trailway bus station, for tires on the buses, for the drivers on the buses, for paid toilets? Were it not for all of this other, you would not have you and her. Let us say for a moment again, I got somebody, a few drinks in at a bar, and they thought I was some kind of wired-up philosopher. And they went, all right, yeah, you're right, you're right. There always seems to be a problem, and it's always two elements, two people, two countries, two philosophies. But then what you're saying is that there's a third force, and all you're saying is everything that's not those two combatants, those two participants, those two parties, you're saying that that's the third force. I go, yeah, that's it. That's all right. That could be true. I guess the way you're putting it, yeah, it's true. But so what? You're nuts. All you have to do, and of course, from ordinary viewpoint, I am nuts. The whole idea is nuts, because in the city, you can't see it. Land-level consciousness cannot see this. But it can get to the point of saying, all right, in any situation, there seems to be two combatants or two parties. And so anybody that's not a part of that would be another force, if you want to call it that, except they're standing aside. They're not playing. They're irrelevant. All you got to do is go out there and play with the irrelevant and see how irrelevant it is. The irrelevant will just shock the britches off of you. Because the irrelevant, playing in the irrelevant, will change things. Whereas staying within the confines of the expected, staying within the confines of the obvious participants, parties, combatants, forces, staying there, nothing happens. Not in your lifetime, not in your limited view of consciousness, and thus people feel as though I am in gridlock. I'm weak. I don't know what to do. I think I know what to do, and I think I try it, but I don't think it works. So I think maybe I'll try it again. I think maybe I'll read another book on it, and I think maybe I'll try it again. Oh, I think maybe I'll go back to drinking, because I didn't used to worry about it that much. Let me jump around to something else we've talked about that I want to stress to you, and it's connected with this, as far as it being down to practical purposes, of staring and not staring. The feeling in the city, the feeling under all ordinary circumstances of a human being conscious in the city, that there is some kind of struggle going on. No matter what I say, no matter that you think I laugh at religion and the forces of good and evil and all that, and right and wrong and true and false, it is in everybody. Trust me, it's in everybody. You're not alone. As far back as you can remember, there seems to be some kind of internal warfare going on in you. You and everybody. And I have talked about it, whether you noticed it or not, even with you new people over the last several months, under several guises. And yet, let me give you another way that's getting dangerously close to the big S, the S word that I can't talk about. The secret, the S word. But it's getting closer, but why not? Here it is, it's almost April. There's another way to feel and then to look at this inherent internal strife, this apparent struggle between two something or others, but a struggle in you. That is between the tendency to stare and the need not to. And this is much more serious than I've ever given any of you reason to believe it is. And I've talked to some of the older people here. I've had them trying not to stare, and they thought it was little excursions here and there. But there is a way in which, in the same way that your forefathers, most of them, felt that this struggle, this internal strife, was simply the forces of good and evil battling for man's soul, trying to win you over to help the forces of goodness and the gods and Jehovah, or else go along with the great, started to call him horny toad, didn't it? What they used to call him, the great evil one, the forces of evil. There is a much more specific and physical description, and I'm not going to give you all of it tonight, I never do, that is a struggle between the, and I'm being very lenient here, but to sneak it up on you, the tendency to stare, and the need not to. Now, if I spend another 5 or 10 minutes here, and those of you who listen good, you're going to see that in one quite real sense, I'm not playing with words, that you can see that this is more of a literal, material description and manifestation of what you and your forefathers, the genes in you of your forefathers, believed was a struggle between good and evil, was a struggle between the parts of the organism wanting to stare and other parts of it, now that it has the word, now that it has the yellow circuit, the need not to stare. This normally unrecognized struggle of the tendency to stare and the need not to could also be seen as being manifestations of the older lower circuits against the younger upper circuits. Maybe I've already come at some of this sideways. Some examples. Maybe I can trick you into getting a glimpse. How about sports? Not watching sports, but going out and taking up water skiing, snow skiing. Sports that maybe you're already involved with, but that you like to do, but especially new sports. It is not simply the joy of the body moving. You know what it is? It conflicts with the tendency to stare. How about travel? Now, I know it's been described in all kinds of ways. You know what the real joy of travel is? Well, most people it's very short-lived, and they can only stand a little bit of it, the same way as sports. Is that it conflicts with the tendency to stare. And most people can't stand much of it, though. And I assume by now that all of you have been in that position, that you've gone to a new country, or even at least a new city, somewhere that you felt uncomfortable, and you first get there, and say it's even a vacation, that you went there ostensibly for fun, and you get off the boat, and there you are in Freeport or in Paris, and it's almost impossible to stare. Not absolutely impossible, because there's some people that get off a plane in a new city. Some of you laughing at, I'm not going to ask questions, either you or you must know somebody, because it's not that unusual. And somebody be back at a travel agent trying to throttle them within less than an hour trying to get back on a plane and get back home. And they don't know why. Oh, they got some story. I don't like the people. Everybody was rude. As soon as I got here, they was rude. There is a tendency. I'm stressing the word tendency. I'm trying to sneak up, but there is a tendency. It is not something you acquired. It is not psychological. It is not a flaw in your makeup. It's in everybody, and it comes from as low down as the circuits are. To stare. And there you are in a new place. And how long does it take? That it's almost as though, and I'm having to use words now that are simply words, and they describe the symptom, that it's almost as though you've had all the newness you can stand. You are not made to not stare. And yet there is a need now in the total organism of man not to stare. And it is a basic conflict that I have never stressed, or I've never even pointed out this way to any of you. But then look, the parts of you that you might, those of you that are falling into this, that you might believe are the very ones that are struggling not to stare, that need not to stare. What's their main activities? The thinkers of the world have to sit around. They're plotting the new programs. And it's these same ones, it's the people from this same general area of the circuitry that do such things as condemn TV. And they don't know why. They've always described it as being this vast intellectual or cultural wasteland, and it's garbage for the mind and all that shit. That's not the problem. Now, they think it is. But you know what life is talking about? I'm not telling you people to go throw away your TVs, but I'm telling you what it is in life that comes out in some group of people that just absolutely condemns TV out of hand, that people shouldn't have a TV. You know why? That. And that's it. Everything else is misdiagnosis. Everything else is the city consciousness, the city level of consciousness talking about. Well, it doesn't help you, it doesn't inspire you, it doesn't educate you. That's not it. It's staring. But the same group of people, those driven by the same circuitry needs that condemn TV, would tell you to do what? Well, spend your time more efficiently, go to a library and read a book and go, there is, in a modern, contemporary person attempting to do this, well, there is in lots of people throughout this planet now, but I'm telling you people specifically, there is the unrecognized struggle that's been going on ever since. You don't have to take my 5,000-year history. Go back as soon as you find the first tale of mythology, the first religion, that their God, or their group of gods, at one time made man intellectual. The whole idea that the gods gave out the word. That is, they made the humans suddenly use words, that they had upper circuits. As soon as they had upper circuits, they had the need, at times, not to stare. And yet in the city, how apparently do you feed the upper circuits? By reading, by going to hear someone lecture, and you do what? You stare. At the lower levels, if we were speaking about, you remember the way I split it up at times, we were speaking about the red, nonverbal, older circuits. They got the need, life or death, to not stare at times, but the rest of the time, what do they do? You don't have to go out to the zoo. Most of you got dogs. Look at them. What do they do? Somebody I read somewhere that doesn't have anything better to do, psychologist or somebody, giving out absolute figures, and I don't doubt it, because they got enough time to do it, that an average dog spends, it was something like 84% of the hours of his life sleeping, which is an extreme form of staring. But the times the dogs are not napping, what's he doing? You should realize it. He just stares. But then the few times they don't stare, of course we're talking about an animal that dances backwards with you, but if you're out in the wilds, something is not under attack. Let us say a lion, in comfortable circumstances, and he's not hungry and he's not about to go chase food, will stare or sleep. But then when the time comes, if he hears something else, somebody encroaching on his territory, or it becomes time to hunt, then you have got the need not to stare. Because the lion has now become a warrior, the same as a human under those kind of circumstances. And you cannot stare. Not if you're going to, in the most efficient way, look after yourself. To be offensive and to even be defensive is when you go into a situation, you've got to be aware of what's going on. You've got to at least look around. Damn it! To walk into a place, just look around and see what's going on. Reconnoiter. Or as they say in Chicago, case the joint. They see what's going on. So you have got the need at times to stare. The organism of humanity. Me telling you people to use that method, the look around method. You should see, it was not a psychological weakness I was trying to point out to you. The organism has a tendency. Maybe I'll just stay with tendency tonight. A tendency, you should know what I mean. If you've been trying to pursue the excursion, your whole organism has a tendency to stare. And it gets through life. The president stares, popes stare, rabbis stare, your mother and father stare, Einstein stared. Everybody. There is the tendency to stare. And you can still live 72.5 years. You may still have a reputation as being intelligent, even an intellectual, a great artist, a thinker, In fact, what is, the great statue of a thinker is what? Rodin knew what he was doing. The cat's right down there. He might as well have a little TV set. He's just staring for all he's worth. You have got to recognize this struggle. And I'm not going to pound and preach. I'm just telling you it is a supreme potential use, because this is yet another description, and it is almost so up to date that it's almost into tomorrow. I'll see how many of you can catch up with it. That there is, and I'm just speaking as physical as I can be. Don't worry about any kind of hidden psychological ramifications or what I'm trying to insinuate by not saying it outright. I'm not doing that. I'm stating it outright. There is the tendency to stare, and I've given you that excursion of trying to continually, just walking from room to room, every new area in which you go, is to look around. Is to realize it's not impossible to do, but it is almost by God impossible to remember to do it. Why? Somebody with your intellectual wherewithal, why is it you can't remember to do it? If I said, look, somebody's going to shoot you if you don't do it. Or I'm going to pop out and I'm going to start awarding $1,000 bills to those of you that I see that do it all the time. I'll be hiding around and watching you. Or if you just intend to do it. If you just think, well, thus far I like what you told me and things, I seem to have benefited from it, so I'm going to try to do it. And it's almost impossible because the organism has the tendency to stare. Then look at all the things I was trying to give you some idea, such as sports, hobbies, travel, in a sense daydreaming, in a sense, of people struggling against staring, and yet the organism has a tendency to stare, and that you will physically, I'm talking about physically, just with the eyes itself, which is a fair reflection in the city of your own consciousness, of walking into a room, getting up in the morning, whatever you're doing. And you're only conscious about within the field of your vision. Oh, all sorts of things could happen. All sorts of things do happen all around you. Well, I don't have to look because it's irrelevant. That's right. I knew you'd catch on. That's why we have bifocal consciousness. That's why you have the center field of vision and then the periphery. Out here is irrelevant. If I need to see something, I'll simply turn around and stare at it. I mean, look at it. If I'll turn my stare from here, I'll hear a loud noise. I'll hear a creaking shoes. And I'll look around. 2 minutes, eh? Let me also point out areas that would appear to be, in the times past, religious. All over the world, all kinds of religions, all the way from Judaism to Christianity to Islam to Buddhism, condemning such things as hatred, anger, greed, jealousy. And it sounds all right, and you've always accepted. You know why? They make you stare. You get mad and you stare. Now, I told you, those religions, they don't say about mad defending yourself. Don't get mad at your neighbor. Don't envy your neighbor's ox or his wife. Don't be greedy. It all sounds like, for some reason, yeah, that's meaningful. Because God said not to. That's good enough for me. He said, if you do, you're going to pay for it. I'm going to tell you what it is. In the city, they're not supposed to know this. It's not necessary yet. Right now, it's still irrelevant by and large. But all of those things, read the 10 Commandments. I don't have to go any further afield. Every one of the thou shalt not are things that make you stare.